we had a very positive reception, particularly from the Cape Town Library people who worked with us very closely the whole way through, and just got a new insight into how a lot of the pressure on the facility could actually be taken off if they accounted for the fact that people had some form of access, some capacity with the phones that were in their pocket, as Jonathan said. And the rules that they have, which are kind of enforced by librarians who have a very particular approach towards knowledge as being something which is primarily in a book, and kind of an attitude towards the space as something which is primarily there to support educational uses. Whereas we could bring them stories about kids who were setting up bands and doing all sorts of other
things
activities which involved the internet use, and could have benefited from more contact with other musicians, for example, or a space to distribute their work. So I think it opened their eyes to what was going on and how much the phones were already being used, but how valuable the free access that they provide already. And that's the reason for these incredibly long queues which we encountered there. We actually changed our whole methodology when we realized what pressure there was on the few machines that were working. For example, libraries where people really only had 15 minutes at a time to do a really complicated project, a page full of instructions of prepare an itinerary for tourists coming to Cape Town, and do it in 15 minutes with 20 people breathing down your neck and massive noise going on in the background of
because we're back to the same point, aren't we, that actually it would probably be almost impossible to do that, even on a fairly high-end phone.
I think what people were telling us is that they do what they have to if there's an emergency on the phone.
Because there's an economic aspect, isn't there?
If there's airtime.
Yes.
So, even if there's an emergency, there's not always airtime. And I think that's the really important thing to realize, is how South Africa's mobile network rates are some of the highest in the world, and definitely among the highest in Africa. And this is a huge constraint on people's use. Apart from that, there's stuff that you need a whole ecology. You need the printer, and you need the photocopier, and you need the books, and you need the librarian, and you need the space where you can get together with a group of other kids. And so we're not really talking about computer versus PC at all.
Yeah.
And that's what we tried to convey in the report, was a sense of there's a repertoire, there's an ecology, the fact that it's a cool space.
Yes.
For somebody who's got to work at home in a very hot shack with a lot of kids running around.
Not terribly good lighting.
Not good
or
light.
None.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things to do with it's just a space where people can work and they run their little small business. It's not just stuff that they do for school. But it's a very powerful force for people that are cut off in other ways from having access.
What are the implications of the research for government or donors funding public access in, say, places like Kenya or India or...
Well, I think it's a massive argument to continue to understand that you're investing not just in a sort of a piece of technology, not just a gadget, that there's this whole human ecosystem which is required for a lot of these complex informational or even communicational and social and entertainment type things to happen. And that by supporting that ecosystem, you can support it in various ways for these devices to hook into it or to be part of it. But you've got to support more than just the gadgets.
So just one more thought on the implications, which is, I think one thing that we did in the study was we ended up teasing out or making this distinction, and the kids are doing it too by bringing the phones, between the box, and the space, and the access to the net itself. And that I think that the public access movement, the community that's been doing this for 20 years, actually hasn't had to do very much analysis on teasing these things out, right? Because there was one place, and that's where the bandwidth was, and where the machine to access the bandwidth was. And what we're seeing is as these things become potentially distinct, that could change the way that space thinks about what it's actually providing. And so on the one hand, we didn't see any kind of loss around the importance of the human support and the training and all that. That's still got to be there, and the safety and the place where the lights are on and all that. But thinking about whether these spots are places where it's where the access in terms of the bits, the access in terms of even sort of less expensive bits, would, I think, it'd be a helpful line of thought for both public and private providers to think about.
Yeah.
If we've seen in other work that Marion and I have both done, just these remarkable skills that people have about, whether it's doing missed calls or Bluetooth sharing, and sort of side loading and all that. People will always find the lowest cost options available to them. And if these venues could kind of support those behaviors in a way, letting people kind of jump in and off of networks, do the side loading when they need to, do the SD card stuff and all that, it would allow those users to get kind of more for their rand, essentially, in terms of bandwidth. And that I think, it's not going to solve everything, but it would go a little, take some good steps in terms of, letting these kids kind of stay online more.
In terms of funders looking at funding public access venues, we did find that the kids who found it easiest to make use of both the phone and what the venues could offer were the kids that had a bit more. They were kind of going to school perhaps in the suburb outside the area. They'd been introduced to certain skills and so on. And so they did have other resources that were available to them. But the kids who we felt really this was their first opportunity ever were often the ones who'd gone to the failing schools where they'd never been able to use computers at all, and kind of signed up for a course after they'd actually graduated from high school. And so we saw massive benefit there still for people who are actually paying with money that they, was really hard to come by, choosing to use the space to improve skills and to give themselves more opportunities and more options to choose from, to do things that were going to make a real difference in their life.